On this Friday night, on the record, a senior naval officer testifies about trying to expose sexual misconduct.
I was berated in a very demeaning manner.
And the defense minister on the defense. Global News uncovers more disturbing allegations aimed at Canada's military. How one woman says she was silenced.
Basically, shut your mouth and carry on.
Fears for the future.
It is really important still to be very vigilant.
New anxiety over the rise of the variants, relaxing restrictions, and a third wave. Plus, hiring spree. Signs Canada's economy is rebounding.
Global National with Donna Friesen. Reporting tonight, Robin Gill.
Good evening and thank you for joining us. There are troubling details tonight about the investigation into allegations of inappropriate behaviour at the military's highest level. A House of Commons probe into the allegations heard from senior defence staff today, including Minister Harjit Sajjan and Lieutenant Commander Raymond Trotter. Military police are investigating former Chief of the Defence Staff General Jonathan Vance, who has denied any wrongdoing, and the man who took over from him, Admiral Art MacDonald, has temporarily stepped aside pending a military police investigation. Sources tell Global News Trotter is the senior naval officer who reported an allegation of sexual misconduct against MacDonald last month and has received anonymous threats since. Global News first brought you details about those allegations, and today we heard what Trotter experienced when he decided to come forward with what he knew. David Akin is following the story for us tonight. David?
Well, Robin, 4 hours of House of Commons Defence Committee testimony today, and at the end of it, we have a disturbing first-person account of what can happen to a whistleblower trying to complain about sexual misconduct in the Canadian Forces.
You know, I have 4 young children. I have a wife who is a registered nurse student. And so I have concerns.
Lieutenant Commander Raymond Trotter says he's had threats that his Navy career might be over after he reported allegations of inappropriate conduct by the military's highest-ranking officer, Chief of the Defence Staff, Admiral Art MacDonald.
I understood it was my legal and also my ethical duty as an officer to report these serious allegations.
Trotter told MPs on the Defence Committee he was acting on behalf of a female colleague, and he said he found the process of reporting a complaint about a senior officer confusing and difficult.
It was a very discouraging and disappointing experience. In this environment, I can certainly understand why so many victims of sexual misconduct would be reluctant to come forward.
He has since been involved in reporting a separate complaint of inappropriate behavior by another senior naval officer, and he said after he did that, he was yelled at for doing so by one of his superiors.
I was berated in a very demeaning manner for following through on my reporting. I believe I was treated this way because the complaint was also about another senior officer.
Still, too many members of the Canadian Armed Forces do not feel safe to come forward.
But Defence Minister Harjit Sajjan came under fire for not doing enough now nor 3 years ago when allegations about former Chief of the Defence Staff, Jonathan Vance, were first raised.
That in 2018, both you, Mr. Minister, and the Prime Minister knew that there were allegations of sexual misconduct against the Chief of Defence Staff, and neither of you took any effective action.
So, lots to digest in 4 hours of testimony, but a key takeaway. Even senior officers like Trotter say it is difficult to report a complaint to an independent authority that is outside of the military chain of command. Robin?
David Akin in Ottawa. Thanks, David. Canada's defence community is facing yet more allegations of sexual misconduct within its ranks. A Department of National Defence employee has come forward to Global News with an account of her experience, not only as a Canadian Forces officer, but as a civilian in the Department of National Defence. Our Ottawa Bureau Chief Mercedes Stephenson has the exclusive details. Mercedes?
Robin, Alex Auclair says she felt she had no choice but to abandon her dreams of a lifetime career in the military after what she describes as a shocking experience as a combat arms officer. In 1997, she says that she was one of 2 women in a class of 200 soldiers at CFB Gagetown in New Brunswick, where she says she was forced to shower with the men. Eau Claire says she reported her experience at the time to a general in Ottawa, who told her to stay quiet if she wanted a career in the forces. She became a civilian with the Department of National Defence, but before long, Eau Claire says she was sitting across the table from some of the very same men who had acted so inappropriately during her time as a soldier. She says the military's overly sexualized culture has seeped deep into the department, where many executives are former officers. Eau Claire also shared details of an alleged sexual assault she says she experienced at the hands of a department executive, but she says she was discouraged from filing a formal report.
I tried to report it, and the answer I got was that because there was no, did I have any DNA evidence? Did anybody witness this? If the answer was no, and if you still needed a job, it was his word against mine, and so basically, shut your mouth and carry on.
Eau Claire says she hopes that her story will empower other civilians who've experienced sexual misconduct in the department to come forward. And it's a call for change in the Canadian defence establishment that she believes is so desperately needed. Robin?
Mercedes Stephenson in Ottawa. The Liberal government is re-establishing an advisory panel to pick the next Governor-General. Intergovernmental Affairs Minister Dominic LeBlanc will co-chair the group with Janice Charette, a former High Commissioner to the United Kingdom. The advisory group also includes Inuit leader Natan Obed. They're responsible for submitting a short list of candidates to the Prime Minister. 2 months ago, Julie Payette resigned from the position after a scathing workplace review. The Prime Minister had some good news today about Canada's vaccine supply. Pfizer has confirmed it's ready for a major ramp-up in deliveries.
Canada will receive at least 1 million Pfizer doses per week from March 22nd to May 10th. 1 million doses of Pfizer alone every 7 days. That's going to make a big difference.
Over the last week, nearly 600,000 vaccine doses have been administered in Canada. That's the highest weekly total yet. More than 2.2 million Canadians have now received at least one dose. That's about 5.8% of the population. There's still a long way to go to get a vaccine to every Canadian who wants one. With new variants spreading, the government is urging people to be cautious.
Right now, we need to run the mile we are in and keep to a steady, cautious pace. Let's all continue to support Team Vaccine by not providing any opportunities for Team Variant to gain more ground.
Eric Sorensen has more on the spread of variants and what could be in store for Canada as warmer weather approaches.
A sunny day foreshadowing spring is a new variable in a pandemic that continues to evolve. Warmer weather should mean less indoor transmission of viruses, but spring also brings more socializing among Canadians.
We know we're heading into the period where the transmissibility will decrease, and we know we need that social connection.
In BC, groups of up to 10 people can now gather outside with distancing. In Ontario, some gatherings like weddings can now be held outside with up to 50 people. Cautious first steps to making life normal again, but with the worry that Canadians will let their guard down.
We're all anxious for the finish line on this long marathon. But right now, racing towards the finish could cost us the success we've worked so long and hard for.
What could undo the progress we're making are the new COVID variants. They're now responsible for over 40% of the cases in Ontario. While the reproduction number for the early variants in the province has fallen below 1, which means it's going away, the R number for the new variants is above 1, meaning transmission is increasing. So while the rate of infections with the early virus has been coming down for several weeks, the new variants, while fewer in number so far, are on the rise, which is why the total number of cases are no longer making progress. In fact, a third wave is not out of the question.
I liken the state of the pandemic right now in Canada as a third act in a 3-act action movie. In the third act, we fight the biggest foe, and so the biggest foe here is the threat of the new variants. But the end is near.
The end is near, restrictions are being lifted, vaccines are coming. It all potentially sends a signal to Canadians to let loose. But the cry from public health officials is not yet.
As we see those public health measures ease, I think it is really important still to be very vigilant about these variants.
Ultimately, say experts, it's up to Canadians to maintain sensible restrictions on themselves.
We can restrict our socialization sufficiently to allow vaccination time to do its job.
It's a tricky balancing act. As spring arrives, with the hope of vaccines in the air, Canadians should resist throwing caution to the winds. Eric Sorensen, Global News, Toronto.
In Ontario, health authorities are taking aggressive steps to get an outbreak at an Amazon facility under control. The facility in Brampton has been ordered to close, and all workers must self-isolate for 14 days. According to the region's top doctor, thousands of people work there. It's not clear how many positive cases are involved, but the health authority says the rate of infection has been increasing significantly in the last few weeks. If you're hoping to do your taxes this weekend and need access to your online CRA account, you may be out of luck. The CRA says it plans to temporarily lock 800,000 accounts tomorrow. The agency is calling it a precautionary move. There's concern that usernames and passwords could have been obtained by unauthorized third parties. The Canadian economy has been hit hard by the pandemic, but there are some signs of optimism. Last month, 259,000 jobs were added across the country. The unemployment rate dropped to 8.2%, the lowest it has been since March 2020. In Alberta, the province with the second highest unemployment rate in the country, this news is important. As Fletcher Kent reports, this might be the restart it so desperately needs.
Restaurant owners Thomas and Char Foister are still in business. Given the last year, that's their definition of success.
It has been stressful.
As hard as 2020 was, there's some optimism now. Barb and Ernie's in Edmonton reopened to diners in February and hired back half its staff.
The next couple of months, we're already looking. Like I said, I think by July we'll be full capacity.
Well, that's hopeful, but...
This week, the Conference Board of Canada projected Alberta will lead the country this year in economic growth. And New Statistics Canada data shows Alberta is one of 8 provinces to see job growth in February. Nearly 17,000 new positions were created in the province, most of those in the hotel and restaurant sector. Unemployment is below 10%, and while that's the lowest rate since the pandemic began, it's also the second highest rate in the country, behind only Newfoundland and Labrador.
I think we should be optimistic, but I think that we also need that healthy dose of caution.
Economist Moshe Lander says getting back to where Alberta was is welcome, but it's far from great. Alberta and its all-important oil and gas sector faced problems before COVID. Vaccines and reopenings won't fix those.
The fact is that what's being left behind as that residue is the problems of the Alberta economy, not the problems of the pandemic.
But even in oil and gas, there's hope. As the world reopens, demand for gasoline and jet fuel is expected to climb.
We've been able to bring back a number of people, been able to start taking care of some families that went through some difficult times. Mom and dad lost their jobs.
Yet more concrete examples of these latest employment statistics. A snapshot that highlights both growing optimism and the many struggles still ahead for Albertans. Fletcher Kent, Global News, Edmonton.
A man believed to be NDP leader Jagmeet Singh's brother-in-law has been charged with assault. This Twitter video is part of the police investigation. It shows a man pushing another man at a Canada-India friendship car rally in Brampton, Ontario. Jodhveer Dhaliwal is charged with assault causing bodily harm. His lawyer tells Global News he has no comment as the case is before the courts. The NDP leader wouldn't comment either. Tensions have increased within the Indo-Canadian community because of the farmers' protests in India. There are accusations some Sikhs who support a separate state in India are causing trouble. The city of Minneapolis has agreed to pay George Floyd's family $27 million. Floyd died when a now former police officer kneeled on his neck for nearly 9 minutes. A statement from the family's lawyer says the settlement, which is the largest ever reached during a pre-trial, sends a powerful message that Black lives do matter and police brutality against people of color must end. Scientists keep discovering new things about COVID-19. Coming up, the evolution of the new coronavirus in patients with compromised immunity. Plus, smooth moves, the ice cleaner heating up the rink. Scientists in the UK believe the B.1.1.7 variant originally came from a single immunocompromised patient, a person who would have had a harder time fighting COVID-19, making them a vessel for the virus to incubate and mutate. Tonight, Farah Nasser explores how effective the vaccines are against any new mutations.
And this is the virus spike protein here.
Even world-renowned expert Ravi Gupta was surprised by how the novel coronavirus started to change. we'd been learning for a year that this virus didn't change. It was always the same. There were a few mutations here and there. And yet in this person, we saw just the most dramatic shifts you could imagine.
As the variant from the UK started to take hold, Gupta saw a patient sick with COVID for more than 100 days. His body weakened by previous chemotherapy. The virus not only wouldn't leave, it kept replicating again and again.
But when we discovered this, there was nothing known about variants. We didn't know that you could find viruses with so many mutations in one virus.
Gupta and a team of researchers at the University of Cambridge took continuous samples as the virus mutated in the man's body.
But one of the mutations we found led us to discover the B117 variant because this mutation in our patient that had emerged in response to treatment actually was one of the key mutations found in the B117.
The patient sadly died. But from this case, scientists gained important clues about what we know now is the more infectious B117 variant and its 23 mutations. There are a growing number of cases showing evidence of immunocompromised COVID-19 patients accelerating viral evolution. Now research is being done to see if those with low immunity will be protected by the COVID vaccines. This also raises questions about vaccines overall.
What is the research showing about how effective these vaccines are against the variants?
So if you look in certain kind of test tube experiments, you'll see that the variant from South Africa, for example, does have a reduced response to the vaccines, especially AstraZeneca. But if you look more closely, you still have way more antibody than you need to neutralize it.
Vaccine manufacturers are exploring booster shots and other ways to bolster COVID-19 vaccines against variants of concern. But for now, it's a race against the virus's sequencing superpowers and scientists rushing to keep up with it. Farah Nasser, Global News, Toronto.
There are a growing number of variant cases. Tomorrow on The New Reality, we explore how that's possible. That's at 7 p.m. with Donna Friesen, right here on Global. Still ahead, Netflix won't chill. The streaming giant is on the watch for password freeloaders.
You're watching Global National.
An ice cleaner for the Vancouver Canucks is sweeping the nation with his moves. His skills went viral after the NHL posted the performance online. The Canucks say the sweeper named Devon has been with the team for 4 years. Fans joke the team could use his energy during the game, not between breaks. Ouch. Harry and Meghan's popularity has taken a hit. For the prince, it's an all-time low in the aftermath of that interview with Oprah Winfrey, where the couple shared what their life is like inside the royal family and claims of racism. According to a poll done in the UK, 48% now hold a negative attitude towards Harry, while 45% have a positive view of the prince. And 58% say they have a negative opinion of Meghan. If you've been using someone else's Netflix account, you may need to get your own. The streaming service is testing ways to crack down on password sharing. Some users in several countries, including Canada, are getting pop-up messages like this. If you don't live with the owner of this account, you need your own account to keep watching. Netflix says the test is being done for security reasons. The stay-at-home reporter. Up next, Mike Drolet gets personal about the pandemic. Living life during a pandemic has been hard on all of us. Tonight, Mike Drolet reflects on how his own family got through these difficult times.
I haven't been down this driveway in a year. 12 months of working virtually hasn't been easy, but I'm one of the lucky ones who's kept his job and stayed healthy. When the pandemic hit, the furthest thing from my mind was documenting my life. Where I see me is in the stories I tell about others. So this is what I made.
Oh, nicely done. I'm impressed, Mike.
From the outset, we looked for distractions. He's running the bases. The pandemic puppy helped fill a void and brought some much-needed laughter into our lives. But the isolation was unavoidable. Virtual school, Zoom hangout with friends, all of it made us want to be more attentive parents.
It's refreshing.
In many ways, the pandemic year was the reset on our priorities that we needed. Everyone gets distracted, be it from work or just life in general. And with an only child, the fear was how the toxicity of 2020 would shape her going forward. You see, we have a precocious 8-year-old. The last thing we want is for her to fear the world. But on the flip side, we didn't want to shelter her from what was going on. In those times when I needed clarity, I'd jump on my bike and hit the trails. And no, I never really found it. And maybe that's the lesson I've learned this year. Don't overthink anything. Enjoy what we have, knowing that others have endured more hardship and that this virus has taken so many lives.
And then go over and point.
Because the ballet studios will open again soon. At least my little ballerina will be ready. Mike Droble, Global News, Toronto.
Very sweet story. That is Global National for this Friday night. I'm Robin Gill. Tonight, your Canada is Peggy's Cove in Nova Scotia. We would love to see your corner of the country, so please keep sending your photos to viewers@globalnational.com. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you back here tomorrow. Have a great night.